Did you know that the first deadlift was performed in 3600 BC, where a variation of the deadlift was depicted in ancient Egyptian tombs? And since then, we have come a long way, where Hafthor Bjornsson in 2020 performed the world's heaviest deadlift, standing at 501 kgs. इस वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे deadlifts के बारे में, what muscles it targets, the types of deadlifts, common mistakes that people generally make while doing deadlifts, and ऐसी कई बहुत सारी interesting चीज़ें deadlifts के बारे में। और जाते जाते मैं आपको ऐसी 3 चीज़ें बताऊंगी जिससे आपकी लिफ्ट्स 100% से इम्प्रूव हो जाएंगी। सो ये वीडियो एंड तक देखना। The deadlift's origins can be traced back to 6th century BC to the Greek island of Thera. वहाँ आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट को एक चट्टान मिली थी जिस पे लिखा था यूमेस्थिस लिफ्टेड मी ऑफ द ग्राउंड। ये हिस्टोरिकल एनेक्डोट हमें बताता है कि ह्यूमंस कई हज़ारों सालों से डेडलिफ्ट जैसे मूवमेंट्स परफॉर्म करते आ रहे हैं। एक और फिगर है हिस्ट्री का, थॉमस टॉपहैम। थॉमस का सबसे बड़ा परस्यूट रहा है एक डेडलिफ्ट का वेरिएशन जिसको बोलते हैं हार्नेस लिफ्ट। हार्नेस लिफ्ट में थॉमस lifted a significant amount of weight using a harness. This method allowed him to lift over 1800 pounds because this method allowed him to distribute the weight differently as compared to a traditional deadlift, showcasing not just his raw strength but also his ability to manipulate leverage to his advantage. Kinda cool, no? The deadlift as we know it today evolved over centuries from these ancient and strongman roots into a key component of strength training and competitive powerlifting. Its universal appeal lies in the simplicity of its concept, lifting a weight off the ground, which embodies fundamental human strength. Now, before we get into what are the different types of deadlifts, what are the different mistakes people make, let's get one thing clear. The greatest misconception that most people have about deadlifts is that it is a pull movement or it's a lower back exercise. In reality, the deadlift is a push exercise with most of the power generated from your legs to push off away from the floor. There are a lot of different types of deadlifts, but in this video we'll be sticking to those variations of deadlifts where you're moving the weight off the floor. So there are 2 types of deadlifts, a conventional deadlift and a sumo deadlift. Now a lot of people believe that a conventional deadlift is a more accurate and a real deadlift as compared to a sumo deadlift where some people think it's cheating. A conventional deadlift involves a smaller stance. Your feet will be placed hip width apart and you will grip the barbell just outside your legs. The range of motion in a conventional deadlift is more as compared to a sumo deadlift. It also targets different muscle groups, putting more emphasis on the posterior chain, which is your lower back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. In a sumo deadlift, the distance between your feet is significantly wider and your hands are gripping the barbell in between your legs. While the range of motion in this lift is shorter, it puts less strain on your lower back, thereby reducing the risk of injuries. It also targets completely different muscle groups. In a sumo deadlift, the emphasis is on your quads, your adductors, and your glutes. Now let's talk about some common mistakes that most people generally make while doing a deadlift. Starting with form, सबसे basic और common mistake जो काफ़ी लोग करते हैं starting with hips either too high or too low, which can either mimic a squat or place undue stress on the lower back. Now keep in mind, everyone's starting position will look different due to different body anatomy, either longer arms or longer legs. The best way to find the right starting position for you is to pick up the barbell and stand straight. Then lower the barbell down as you would while performing the deadlift and then freeze as soon as the barbell touches the floor. That's your starting position. Make sure you note where your hips are at this position. That's exactly where your hips should be when you start your deadlift. दूसरी चीज़ जो कई लोग फॉर्म के साथ गलत करते हैं इज़ ओवरली आर्चिंग देयर बैक। स्पाइन सीधा रखने के चक्कर में काफ़ी लोग ज़्यादा ही आर्च कर देते हैं जिससे बैक पे स्ट्रेन आ सकता है। You have to keep in mind that your spine is made to move. Some amount of flexion or rounding is alright. While upper back rounding is fine, a lot of athletes actually intentionally round their upper back. Try to ensure that you keep your lower back neutral in order to lift safely. And lastly, A lot of people just tend to step up to the bar and pull it up all in one go. While this may be okay on lighter loads, when it comes to lifting heavier, the jerking motion can be injurious to your spine. Apart from injuries, this method, also called the grip it and rip it method, does not really optimize your strength. Now moving on to another common mistake that most people make, it's maxing out every session. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to hit their PRs in every single session. Now this may work if you're a complete newbie at the gym and you're still figuring out your strength and its limitations, but in the long run, this will not help you get stronger. The holy grail of building strength is, you guessed it, progressive overload. Starting at 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max for roughly 4 to 8 reps is a good place to start. And then increase the weight by 5 to 10% every session till you can't add any more weight. This progression of weights will do two things. One, it'll help you improve your technique in the lighter sessions. And two, it'll prepare you mentally for a higher weight in the next session. This is especially important because lifting heavy requires a lot of mental strength. Additionally, continuously lifting at or near your 1 rep max is really taxing on the body. You will accumulate a lot of fatigue faster, which means you will need more breaks or longer rest periods, and it also increases the risk of injury, thereby stalling your progress. A PR or a maxing out session should ideally only be 3 to 4 times a year. Lastly, you might just be training deadlifts way too often. A deadlift is a compound movement that is really tiring on the body, that requires a lot of energy from your body. Putting it 3 times a week in your workout routine is not a good idea. Instead, what you can do is plan your workout to ensure that you have enough time to recover from your past session. Most people find deadlifting 1 or 2 times a week optimal for them. You can try this out on your own, experiment and see what works best for you. Deadlifting way too often can also lead to injuries and reduced performance. A good sign to watch out for is when the weight you were lifting last week starts feeling heavier. Also, make sure you're not focusing too much just on deadlifting. A well-rounded training program includes a good mix of strength training components, and focusing too much on the deadlift while neglecting other compound movements like squats and bench press can lead to muscular imbalances and hinder overall physical development. A well-rounded training program that includes a good mix of strength training, mobility work and cardiovascular fitness is vital for overall health and performance. Now, related to form, let's talk about a few things that you're probably not doing while performing a deadlift. The first is a slack pull. Now, what is a slack pull? Now, the slack pull is generally done for 2 reasons. One, there is a tiny bit of gap between the barbell and the plates. To remove this gap, we do a slack pull. If you skip the slack pull, you will feel a jerking motion, leading to a loss in the initial momentum. So while setting up, you pull on the barbell slightly just before you lift the weight, and you'll hear a click sound as the barbell touches the plates, indicating the slack has been taken out. The second and primary reason is to indicate to our body that we're getting ready to exert force and lift a heavy object. Here, the slack pull is more about creating a relationship with the barbell, the floor and your hands. While setting up, once you get into place and just before you're about to lift the weight, you grip the barbell and pull up slightly with your hands while simultaneously pushing your feet down into the ground, sort of pulling upwards and pushing downwards at the same time. This helps you create tension in the barbell before the actual lift and can actually make the lift go much smoother. A lot of lifters skip this step, which can lead to a rounded back or a failed lift. Next, we move on to bracing. Bracing involves creating intra-abdominal pressure to support the spine during the lift. This is done by taking a deep breath through your mouth into the belly, then tightening the abdominal muscles as if you're preparing to be punched. You then hold this tension throughout the lift. Picture a Coke can. A full can is harder to crush as compared to an empty can. As you fill air into your core, you are essentially filling the can. Proper bracing protects the spine, improves transfer of force from the lower body to the upper body, enhances stability and strength during the lift. So make sure you maintain a proper brace throughout your lift. Lastly, the setup. How you set up for a lift matters way more than you would think. Every person has their own way of setting up or preparing for a lift. आपको अपने लिए अपना सही सेटअप खुद ढूंढना होगा ट्रायल एंड एरर मेथड से. बट हाँ, आपको ये बात का ध्यान रखना है कि आपके हर डेडलिफ्ट सेट से पहले आपका सेटअप एकदम सेम दिखना चाहिए. Having a good solid setup can literally make or break your lift. A good setup can make the weight feel lighter initially, which can give you a confidence boost during a lift. Now, during a setup, some people like to swing their arms to loosen them up, to cue their minds to remember that the hands must only be used as hooks to hold the barbell. A significant number of lifters, newbies or even experienced ones, fail to include these three important elements into their deadlift technique. Iska reason is generally a lack of knowledge or proper understanding of the technique, or they simply choose to neglect these aspects because they think it's not that important. Using proper technique and having a proper setup that includes all aspects, including bracing and slack pull, can literally make your body feel like a well-oiled machine while doing a deadlift. Now finally, let me reveal the secret on how you can improve your lifts by 100%. First, you must have a top set and back down sets. Now let me tell you what a top set is. The top set is going to be your first heavy set. Generally, there are only 1 to 2 top sets. All sets before this are considered warm-up sets. These are generally performed at or near your maximum effort for a low number of reps, say 1 to 4 reps. The idea is to challenge your strength limits and condition your brain into lifting heavy safely within a session. After completing your top set, you come down to your back down sets, where you reduce the weight by 10 to 20%. Here, you perform more sets with a higher number of reps. They allow for high quality volume work at a reduced intensity. However, the effort or the RPE, that is your rate of perceived exertion, remains the same as in your top set. Since the weight is lighter, you can lift with better technique and train your brain to generate the same effort as with a heavier load. The combination allows you to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. You test your strength and you also work on your technique for a heavier load. The next magic element is deload weeks. The deload week is a planned period in your training program where you reduce either the number of reps or the weight or your training frequency. The deload week helps you recover from the weeks of accumulated fatigue from your heavy intense sessions. It also allows for physical and mental recovery, reduces the risk of overtraining, and may help you overcome your plateaus. Now, this does not mean that you need a deload every 3 to 4 weeks. You must learn to recognize the signs when your body actually needs a deload. Simply just feeling sore or tired is not a reason for a deload that can be fixed with a good night's sleep. A good sign to watch out for is when you start failing your lifts repeatedly, when you feel like your nervous system has been completely fatigued and as if your brain and your muscles are not connected anymore. The sensation is a bit like knowing you have the strength but are unable to push. Lastly, accessories. Simply just deadlifting is not going to help you get stronger at your deadlift. You must do additional exercises called accessories to help train those specific muscles that are involved in the deadlift or to train similar movement patterns. As we know, more muscle equals more strength. For the deadlift, a few accessory exercises that you can do are RDLs. They will help strengthen your posterior chain, which is important while doing a deadlift. Second is the hip thrust. The thrusting motion mimics the lockout part of a deadlift. This is especially helpful if you find that you're getting stuck during the last part of the lift. And third, back extensions to help train your lower back and also to mimic the pull part of the deadlift. So make sure you don't skip out on the accessory work because that's where you're going to build your actual strength. So that's it for this video, guys. Hope we covered everything about deadlifts in this video. If we missed out on anything, let us know in the comments below. आगे भी हम ऐसे वीडियोस बनाते रहेंगे. So like if you like this video and subscribe if you love this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.